Welcome, friends. You're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we'll take a detailed look at the situation in Ukraine as of February 19th, 2026. Today has brought an enormous number of truly important and significant events, so let's get straight to the analysis without further preamble. The flow of important news today is unrelenting, and we'll begin with the Zaporizhzhia sector of the front. According to incoming reports, the armed forces of the Russian Federation have successfully repelled every single attack on the bridgehead that the Russian army holds along the Haichur River, on the stretch between the settlements of Huliapol and Pokrovske. We're talking about positions such as Ternovate, Kosovtseva, and further south toward Tsvetkove. As you can see, the map has undergone very significant changes compared to the previous day. This is how it looked just yesterday, on February 18th, 2026. Today's corrections were made on the basis of various informational materials published primarily by pro-Russian experts and analysts, as well as several geolocations independently published by the Ukrainian side. In the available footage, we can observe counterstrikes, or more precisely, attempted offensive actions by the armed forces of Ukraine in the area of Ternovate, with active use of robotic systems. It's worth noting that the topic of robotization is today attracting colossal attention from the global community. I think most of you have already had a chance to watch various videos featuring humanoid robots performing combat training tasks and demonstrating different operational capabilities. This direction will clearly become the main vector of military development for most nations in the foreseeable future. But returning to the specific footage, in the presented recordings, we see Ukrainian robotic platforms on tracked chassis attacking positions and buildings where Russian units were presumably stationed. This episode was captured at this exact point on the map, and these frames simultaneously confirm that Russian units continue to maintain their presence in Ternovate. It is important to emphasize that the Ukrainian side is carrying out its counterstrikes exclusively using robotic platforms, without sending infantry into the attack on these directions. This in itself is an extremely significant signal. It should also be noted that this is far from the first section of the front, where Ukrainian forces have been deliberately striving to use robotic systems in the course of counter-strike operations. At present, this technology on the side of the armed forces of Ukraine is undergoing active field testing and refinement, and it appears that by the end of 2026, we will begin to witness the mass combat deployment of robotic systems directly in assault operations, in clearing fortified strongpoints, and in other offensive actions. It is critically important to understand how the Russian side will adapt its tactics and build effective countermeasures against this fundamentally new threat on the battlefield. Summarizing the Zaporizhzhia sector, based on the totality of available video materials and analytical reports, the map has been corrected, and we can now see that according to the majority of pro-Russian and neutral experts, the Russian side has taken full and stable control of positions along the railway line running between the settlements of Zalizychne and Ternovate. In doing so, Russia has completed the formation of a bridgehead for a subsequent westward offensive towards such settlements as Rozdvianka, Vozdvizhenka, and Verkhnya Tersa. Russian FPV drone operators are already being regularly spotted working in the area of these points. Published footage shows Ukrainian equipment entering tree lines being immediately struck by drones. Slightly to the west, additional video materials are also being published showing the movement of armed forces of Ukraine equipment coming under drone strikes. In other words, active preparations are in full swing for the launch of a large-scale Zaporizhzhia offensive, the first phase of which will be the advance on the Orikhiv direction, followed later by a strike directly toward the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. Despite all of Ukraine's attempts to counterattack and push Russian forces off the bridgehead, the Russian command has clearly defined its priorities, held the occupied positions on the Ukrainian bank of the Haichur River, and is now systematically preparing to advance further. At the same time, to the north, on the northern sector of the front, the Ukrainian counter-offensive is not letting up. The map has changed again today, and this time the corrections came from pro-Ukrainian cartographic resources, which clarified the situation on those sections where Ukrainian reconnaissance and sabotage groups managed to infiltrate. Nevertheless, the Russian side is methodically delivering massive strikes against all crossings, bridge crossings, and positions concentrated along the Vovcha River. In the presented footage, we see another strike on the bridge in the area of the settlements of Kolomytsi and Tike, a crossing that the armed forces of Ukraine had been actively using to transfer reinforcements southward toward Velika Mikhailivka. Another FAB strike has also been recorded on a location used by Ukrainian units to cross from one bank of the Vovcha River to the other. The river itself is thus under effective fire control, and we can see that the systematic destruction of logistical infrastructure is steadily draining the Ukrainian offensive of strength and sustainability. By inertia, individual Ukrainian units continue to move southward. But it is quite possible that this is already outdated information, and the actual situation at this moment looks different. But all available materials taken together indicate that in the near term, the Russian Federation will be making attempts to organize its own counteroffensive with the aim of recovering all territories lost during the Ukrainian counteroffensive operations. Moreover, it is possible that Russian units, upon reaching the Vovcha River, will attempt to force a crossing and develop their strike in the direction of such settlements as Havrilivka, Malomikhailivka, Velika Mikhailivka, and Pokrovske. It should be recalled that parallel to the Ukrainian counteroffensive along the Vovcha River, the Russian army has simultaneously stepped up activity east of Havrilivka, in the area of Ivanivka and Novopavlivka. Today, corrections are being published again by various pro-Ukrainian resources. Individual sources report improvements in Russian army positions in the Ivanivka area. This information today was being disseminated primarily through pro-Ukrainian cartographic services. Let's take a look at exactly how the map was being corrected over the past 24 hours. Here we can see that pro-Ukrainian cartographers are recording the expansion of the Russian bridgehead between Ivanivka and Novopavlivka. Information has also come in recently about an advance toward the eastern outskirts of Havrilivka, although this data still awaits official confirmation. Overall, notable activity is being observed on this section, and apparently the movement here will develop in the direction of the railway line connecting Mezhova and Vasilivka. Slightly to the north, the Ukrainian side continues large-scale fortification work along the Pavlohrad to Pokrovsk highway. Footage shows anti-drone nets, shelters, and overhead covers being installed. The works are being carried out on a genuinely large scale with significant human resources engaged. Essentially, a full-fledged defensive line is being formed with maximally protected logistics so that when active offensive operations begin on this direction, Ukrainian forces and their supply lines will be as well protected as possible from Russian drone strikes. Next, we move to the Dobropilya sector of the front, from which there is also quite a bit of important news. Today, according to pro-Ukrainian cartographers, Russian units have begun actively moving northward, from the direction of Hryshyn and Pokrovsk toward the small village of Shevchenko. Apparently, the Russian side managed to bypass the main defensive line located to the west of Rodinske, and in effect placed this small area under threat of semi-encirclement. In the near future, we will most likely witness the straightening of the front line through the forced withdrawal of Ukrainian units in the northward direction, towards Svitle, Vedyanske, and Shevchenko. Next, let's turn to the Kostiantynivka sector, from which a great deal of important news is coming in today. The map here, as you can see, has again undergone changes. Today's corrections were provided by various pro-Russian sources, according to which the Russian army managed to significantly improve its positions in the area of Stepanivka and Dovabalka. This is how the map looked by the end of February 18th, and this is the configuration that now corresponds to the situation on February 19th. Recall that over the past several days, the Russian army has been conducting active offensive operations in the southwestern part of Kostiantynivka, and it appears that Russian units have indeed managed to fundamentally improve their position and in effect cut off the settlements of Dovabalka and Roskoshne from Kostiantynivka approximately along the designated line of demarcation. After Kostiantynivka was cut off from Dovabalka, Russian units immediately began active offensive operations on this sector. Ukrainian units in this area are now experiencing the most serious problems with logistics and supply, as a result of which they will hardly be able to mount any effective resistance and will be forced to systematically fall back further north and northwest in the direction of Mykolaiopilya. We move on to the Sloviansk sector. Minor corrections have been recorded here today in the area of the settlement of Nikiforivka. Ukrainian sources published a video recording capturing a series of strikes on Russian military positions in the central part of the settlement. Based on this video material, we make a correction. It is clear that Russian units are already reaching the northern outskirts of Nikiforivka. It is quite possible that in the very near future, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation will officially confirm the establishment of control over this settlement. As for the bridgehead in the Nikolaivka, Ryalexandrivka, Reznikivka triangle, the map has remained unchanged for several days in a row. Throughout this entire time, we have been receiving a colossal volume of video materials featuring FPV drone strikes, artillery strikes, and various drone attacks, yet the map has not undergone any substantial correction. At present, the Ukrainian side is holding a sufficiently powerful defensive line here, which Russian units are being forced to methodically grind through. The map does change, of course, but the pace of advance here is incomparably lower than, for example, on the Zaporizhzhia direction or near Kostiantynivka. Minor corrections are also being recorded in the Lyman area. Recall that a few days ago, we discussed the Russian army's attempts to bypass the city on its flanks, seeking to avoid heavy urban combat within its actual boundaries. According to the latest incoming reports, Russian units have managed to reach the settlements of Brusivka and Stary Caravan from the northeast. Apparently, the Russian command intends to first fully establish control over all supply routes leading to Lyman, and only then proceed to its systematic isolation. In any case, the city of Lyman still retains a supply corridor through the settlements of Mayaki and Sidorov, but Russian units on both flanks are steadily closing in on this last supply artery. In addition, today we are receiving information about extremely fierce fighting in the area of Sosnovo, Yarova, and Oleksandrivka. A brutal confrontation has unfolded here between Russian troops and Ukrainian formations. The AFU are counterattacking in the Sosnov and Yarova area, and there are also attempts to infiltrate sabotage groups in the direction of Novoselivka. Russian sources, however, report that all attacks have been successfully repelled, and Russian units are holding their positions. Russian sources are also reporting an advance on the territory of Sviatohirsk. According to available data, a significant portion of this settlement has already transitioned into grey zone status. No changes have been recorded on the Kupiansk direction. Of the news from the northern sectors, today the most interesting events come from the area of Hluchiv. Recall that yesterday, pro-Russian sources and the Ministry of Defense reported on the advance of the Russian army in the area of the settlement of Kharkivka. Today, video materials were published capturing in detail the course of combat operations for this small village, located in the very northernmost part of Sumy Oblast. Thus, the Russian side is confirming the establishment of control over the settlement not only through official reports, but also with a concrete video evidence base. Today as well, a number of neutral cartographers supplemented the overall picture by showing that several forest belts in the immediate vicinity of Kharkivka have also come under the confident control of Russian forces. The fighting in Ukraine will apparently continue, and in the near future, its intensity will only grow. Contributing to this is the simultaneously unfolding situation in the Middle East. According to incoming data, the United States of America has succeeded in concentrating an extremely powerful military grouping around Iran. All ships have already practically taken up their assigned positions. Hundreds of fighter aircraft of the F-22, F-16, and F-35 type have been deployed to the region. 2 full carrier strike groups have been assembled, and a significant number of reconnaissance aircraft have also been concentrated. Overall, the grouping appears to be exceptionally powerful, and noticeably surpassing in its parameters the one we observed in May to June of 2025, when strikes were carried out against Iranian nuclear infrastructure facilities. A number of analysts do not rule out that as early as the night of February 19th to 20th, or possibly the night of February 20th to 21st, an active phase of hostilities on this theater may begin, between the United States with allies and Iran. That's all for today, dear friends. Thank you for watching the channel. Subscribe, hit the like button, and stay with us. All the best to everyone.